This project is titled Design with Nature, and therefore we're going to be using two elements that are in combination. One from human-made materials, the silk-screened color aid pack that you have in your kit, and more adventurously, if that's a word, you're going to go out into nature and find, especially at this time of year, a variety of fall leaves, which are then going to be combined with the color aid. The point of this assignment, probably very differently stated than the other assignments, is that I would really want you to get into a personal, subjective, emotional response in your construction of these collages. I mean, prior to this, we've been told about figure fields and dimensions of color that are very specific, or illusions with the gouache that are relief structures or deep space or transparencies. I'm not telling you that strictly what to do with these. There's just two particular materials that you'll be working with, and I think this requires a very thoughtful, felt, quiet response to what you're seeing in front of you. So for a bit of historical background to this kind of exercise, I have to tell you that I've really stolen it from an historical figure, Joseph Albers, a very famous artist who taught at the Bauhaus, a German art school that existed in the early 20th century. He and his wife, Annie, herself a very important textile artist, moved to the United States in 1933 because the Nazis had taken over Germany, and they were very much against modernist art, the international flavor and freedom of the Bauhaus. They were very much against the kind of social programs that the Bauhaus felt was really the core of art. That art, architecture, and society were a kind of aesthetic design as opposed to being a military camp. So Albers comes to the United States to a place called Black Mountain College, which is another historic place, early 20th century, in 1933. He becomes the premier art instructor there. And because of his philosophy from the Bauhaus and because of his own teaching and artwork, which was very much a kind of, not really a science, but a really strong intellectual and sort of thoughtful investigation of color, almost by experimentation. It wasn't quite science, but it was a kind of intuitive trying out of different kinds of color together. So he formulated a number of exercises that became very influential through the 20th century. And he also, along with that direction, was very struck by fall leaves, the autumn colors in the United States, especially northeastern United States, during that time, and therefore he was very much wanting to somehow bring together a design sense of nature, which is what happens naturally, what happens in the world, with the sort of creative effort of human beings. So he began to develop a number of exercises that combined fall leaves and their brilliant colors, their beautiful colors, the various complexities of color in natural leaves, and colored papers. And today we have a set of very immaculate colored papers called Color Aid, silkscreen colors that you have in your kit and that we'll use in this exercise. So think about this as an exercise as in design with nature. In other words, you're taking things from nature and you're juxtaposing them, you're perhaps manipulating them in some way, cutting them up, putting them back down, but also putting them with a field of colors that are almost too perfect, or immaculate, silk-screened inventory of color. So what are the material qualities of each of these two things? In the color aid, you've got blankness. You've got something that's perfect. You've got a whole inventory of many, many color qualities that are organized in a sequential and logical manner. We'll talk about that later. But with the leaves, we're talking about texture and roughness, and not only color, but a structure, a shape. And one of the great resources for designers is the very geometry of nature, the very structure of nature. And with the leaf, you've got a vein structure, you've got the outside shape, and there's no reason why you have to use the leaves as these are, as whole shapes, but they can be, sliced and diced and put in more complex arrangements with one another. But it's essentially a caring about the quality of the leaf against and with the quality of the color. And with your previous assignments, especially in terms of figure field, you have a background of thinking about and playing with shapes on a surface, and you can play with complexities and or simplicities, with both the natural form and with the color aid. And not only the figure fields, but think about your magazine dimensions of color, objective qualities of color, and how you're talking about complements with this dark purple on one side and this sort of neutral brownish yellow on the left side. So not only figure fields and color theory, but also just a kind of almost sci-fi feel for aura or halos or repetition of shape across that surface, where you're really emphasizing the shape of the leaf by a kind of aura of another color, contrasting color around it. Now, one of the construction issues you're going to have in this is that many of these examples were done with larger, more expensive blocks of color aid, and I, for the last 2 years, hunkered down and made it a more economical situation with a smaller pack of color aid. So you may be doing several colors in back and more than you see in these, here. But one of the things you can adjust would be the size of the leaves or portions of the leaves. Now this isn't multicolored in the background, but the size of those leaves and the kind of scattered, windblown orientation of everything, points to the fact that you don't have to fill a given composition with a whole leaf. You could go for portions of it, or you could find smaller leaves to fit in. Now, we've been talking about, for the most part, different color aid juxtapositions, multicolors in the background, and mostly finding your color through the color aid itself juxtaposed to the leaves. Here you have, yes, a kind of rich neutral blue-green in the background, but also with the overlapping of these two leaves, I see a very intelligent and somber and really expressive warm brown and light brown on the top leaf, and then this almost purple neutral color in the background leaf that's peeking out from behind it. Now, the fortunate or unfortunate thing about this is that when they were freshly put together, these compositions had brilliant fall leaves. We got to the photography a little bit later, and therefore they are a little bit more shop-worn and dull. I do think that neutral colors, brownish colors that aren't screaming with intensities, are beautiful. But when you come to make your own this season, you're likely to have much more strong fall leaf color. Now, the beautiful piece, and sometimes minimalism, just putting things starkly next to each other, is enough. You don't have to get terribly ornate or complicated with your composition. And the one thing that I want to point out about this is the beautiful juxtaposition of that sort of purple halo that is around the center, admittedly faded leaf, and that what is actually a neutral yellow-green, but neutral brown, warm brown in the background. With this one, I get a sense that, very straightforward outlines and echoes around each of the strong leaf colors, and I love the way they're positioned and the leftover space that's in the background. But I think it's almost inspired by, or at least associates itself with, decoration. There's no reason why you can't take the complexity of nature, simplify it a little bit, and almost refer to textile designs or high-class wallpaper or other kinds of decorative motifs. And almost the opposite of a decorative idea, almost the opposite of trying to make things busy and pleasant to look at. This one here seems to be almost a ghost of an image. We talked about in previous assignments minimalism, the kind of less is more sensibility, and the idea that this shape is almost a subtle ghost on that red rouge background, and that one stripe down the edge seems to be a kind of wall or border up against that shape is really eloquent. It's really beautiful and done with so much sensitivity to placement and selection. And a kind of kissing cousin, a kind of relative of the last one that's in the minimalist family would be this one, where the leaf fills the whole rectangle, top to bottom, very subtle in color, and is a beautiful juxtaposition of a couple of leaves, one on top of the other, one warmer in the front, one more neutral and brown in the back. Again, a minimalist, sensitive composition. Now, because I've emphasized fall leaves, doesn't mean you can't go for other kinds of related shapes, related forms in nature, leaf-like and leaf shapes, shrubberies, smaller plants, anything that would inspire a kind of interesting composition. So this one becomes, instead of a big silhouette of a leaf shape, it becomes more of a linear drawing. It becomes more of an explosion from that lower left-hand corner. The variety, as opposed to what we've seen so far, the difference between this and what we've seen so far is a good thing to keep in mind. And following up on the idea that you don't have to use all straightforward, fall leaf project shapes. Here you have a very delicate kind of fern-like structure, and it really brings up the issue of being careful and well crafted, the sensitivity, the care, the tweezer-like detail that this one exhibits is something you should keep in mind in terms of the quality of your work. Now, if you're cutting, slicing, dicing, sort of manipulating and cutting into the leaf and taking portions of it, keep in mind that it's got a structure, it's got a rhythm, it's got a kind of continuity of shapes within it, so that if you're going to eat into the shape itself, if you're going to play with portions of its structure like this one, keep a respect for its original kind of structure and complexity. Now, I've said that this is a break in the sequence of assignments, and that it's very subjective. It's very much individually constructed and felt by you. But you can see the straightforward relationship to something that we did before, which was the reversible figure field. You stare at this long enough, and for me at least, the leaves can become the space. The darker areas become the figure in front, and vice versa, flipping back and forth. So it has more dynamism, it has more energy, it has more pizzazz in a sense than some of the other more contemplative ones. So I've made a kind of point about the leaf structure, the leaf shape, the forms and the designs being dictated and being made by the leaf itself. But that doesn't necessarily mean you ignore the color aid. The color aid in some of these, if not many of these, can become just as strong a factor, and perhaps, as in this one, a more complex factor. In other words, several kinds of shapes that are sort of juxtaposed to or in contrast to the leaf shape itself. So in general, to sum it up, this should be a very individually initiated and designed assignment. You've got raw materials that are around you outside. You've got the raw material of your kit's color aid, and you're really, as in many of the assignments, putting things together that are in contrast. So I want you to think about that a lot, and to respond to the shapes of the leaves and the colors of the color aid, as well as the colors of the leaves, to the nth degree. So a quick review of how you would glue these things on. It's not terribly different from your other collages, but there is the delicate quality of the leaf. And what I've done in this one, you don't have to through all of yours, but what I've done in this one is really paid attention to the structure of the leaf, paid attention to the vein structure and the form and nature, and sort of gone along with that in whatever geometry has been presented. So I've been playing around with the placement of these things. It's one that I might try at this point. So I'm going to take one of these leaves. You'll very often have to lift them up with your X-Acto knife. I have already obviously glued the two pieces of your 3 by 4.5 color aid swatches. Okay, I will take this away from the color aid. I'm choosing to use this side, and with the rubber cement, you're getting a moderate amount on the brush, not too much. And with the scrap piece of paper, just as you've done with your other collages, you're overkilling, oh geez, I've just broken it. You're overkilling the area of the rubber cement, and it's falling apart because it's so brittle. Let's see what we can do. Well, let's go with the accident. Let's go with the creative accident and see what happens. We can perhaps place the other things in there. I'm going to do this. And with the rubber cement, you are, as in your others, pressing down, letting it ooze out, not worrying too much about what is excess beyond the shape that you're gluing. And let's see, I don't mind that, because what's going to happen, especially with the rubber cement, there's the ability to clean up carefully. This is your rubber cement pickup. It's a square that's found in your kit. This works very well, especially on the color aid, to pick up the rubber cement once it's dried. Since we had some creative accidents with the brittleness of the leaf chipping and falling apart, and that will happen to you, I'm sure, on occasion, I just keep on going with what you have to find a more intuitive and accidental, not prearranged design. So I'm going to take what's left of this thing and glue it on the back and reposition it on top of the other one, so that we're doing a design that's evolving from our initial perfection into something that's more unexpected. Now you'll find that picking up the leaves can be kind of frustrating, so I found that the X-Acto knife under the edge of it pulls it up quite nicely. And I'm going to get this to cover certain things that I want covered and become part of the design that's below, so we get a multi-layering here, and again a kind of geometry that's based on that center vein of the leaf. Take this, press it, just as you've done with your Canson papers, colored papers, and with your magazine clippings. Hey, you've got to press down, and you'll notice that along with those you've done, you can move it around just a little bit. Okay, even when it's semi-drying. Okay, if you want to alter things a little bit, that's fine. And again, I keep reinforcing this, as you probably noticed from past assignments, that you let the rubber cement dry. You don't try to take it out, because if you do take it out when it's wet, it will mar, particularly the color aid. So this fellow up here looks like a good candidate. And what side do I want to use? There's something light and value contrasting in this way. There is more of my ever repetitive complementary contrast if we turn it this way, because it's a kind of red-orange that might fit well against a green. So again, if this is the side I'm using, make sure you get the other side, the opposite side, have another small trash brush, like a watercolor brush that you don't care about, it might work a bit better on the leaves themselves because they're a little more delicate, but you'll get away with the one that's in the cap. Just make sure things, as I'm trying to do, things are adequately covered with the rubber cement. Moderate dousing, and not too worried about what might squish out the edges. Again, I'll use my surgeon's knife, pull it up, and what was I going to do here? Something like this. Let's see. Again, this is not what you have to do for your design. This is just something that strikes me with all the raw materials I have. And that looks like it's not going to stay terribly well, but let's press it down and see what happens. Pick up the leaf. Let's see if I do it successfully. Pick up the leaf and put some more rubber cement underneath. Press it down again. Just perhaps leave something there. The weight on it. Let's see what happens. Any more? Let's see, this is a beautiful piece here. So I'd like to find a way to begin to use this as well. And even with some overlapping, I might fit it in this side. Again, there are no formula for this. There are no cookbook recipes. You are sort of, it's an adventure of your own in terms of finding the shapes, designing the shapes within the leaf or with a whole leaf. I'm really emphasizing splitting it up and putting it back down again, but again, as in many of the examples in the video, you've got the option to use whole leaves as well as partial, and that seems to actually work. Now let's trouble down there. Let's get back to this one. I think what seems to be working better is to put on a fairly large amount of rubber cement, really thick wad of rubber cement, and let it sort of sit there before pressing down to the nth degree, and then pressing down and having it squeeze out the edge. So you have more rubber cement under it if you do it that way than trying to do a moderate amount. So I think overkill on the rubber cement, letting it sit there for a while, and then, and I really should let this stay a little bit longer, but I'm impatient and I'm going to try it. On and then press it down at the end, it seems to be working a little bit better. So just as a precaution, it may or may not work, I'm going to put something on here. So I've decided to keep it in this orientation, not add more for now, and clean up the rubber cement when it dries. That is the key, I think, to put on a relatively thick layer of rubber cement, to just place it there. Don't press too quickly, because your leaves are rather fragile. But if you let it just sit there in that puddle of rubber cement, you then, and if after it gets a bit drier, you can, and it's nothing's seeping, nothing's turning up. You press it down, and then when the glue on the outside dries, when the excess glue dries, or when the glue even on top of the leaves dry, you take your rubber cement pickup, which seems to be working pretty well, and move away from the leaves on their edges where there's been an overflow. And you can see that by and large, the rubber cement is being picked up. It's a tough one right here. It's sort of sticky. It's a bit like an eraser that you're taking off gobs of dried cement. Try to get especially the color aid as clean as possible. Sometimes you can actually roll it into a ball. We'll let it dry a little bit more and take